It started with the alley, the one behind the old Kresge's Van Dyne, the one that always smelled of piss and old rain, no matter how bright the sun shone. They called it Blood Alley, even before the disappearances started. Just one of those names that sticks to a place, like mud to a boot. For 22-year-old Jenna Mayhew, it was just a shortcut home from her shift at the diner, a slice of shadow she'd been cutting through since she was a teenager. Now, it felt different. Now, it felt like a throat, waiting to swallow her whole. 10 women. That was the number the local news kept repeating, their voices tight with a practiced, somber glee. 10 women from our quiet little town of Derry had vanished. Not all at once, but one by one, like lights being snuffed out in a long, dark hallway. They'd find a shoe here, a scarf there, a single earring glinting in the muck of Blood Alley. Little breadcrumbs leading nowhere. The police, with their grim faces and tired eyes, called him the Shadow, a name that felt both theatrical and terrifyingly apt. He moved through the town unseen, unheard, a phantom who fed on fear. Jenna felt his presence even when she was safe in her small apartment, the deadbolt thrown, the chain latched. It was a cold spot in the room, a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision. At the diner, she'd look up from wiping down a counter and see a man's silhouette pass the window, and her heart would hammer against her ribs like a trapped bird. Was it him? Was that the Shadow? The fear was a constant companion, a low hum beneath the surface of her everyday life. It made the familiar streets of her hometown feel alien, predatory. Every corner she turned, she expected to see him. Every gust of wind that rustled the autumn leaves sounded like footsteps behind her. Her only real solace was Pastor Michael. Kay was new to the Derry Community Chapel, young for a man of the cloth, with a kind face and eyes that seemed to hold a deep, comforting wisdom. He'd taken a special interest in the youth of the congregation. And Jenna, who had drifted from the church after her mother passed, found herself drawn back by his earnest sermons about faith in the face of darkness. Started a small Bible study group that met on Tuesday nights in the church basement. There were only a few of them, mostly other young people looking for an anchor in the storm of fear that had engulfed the town. Pastor Michael was good to her. He'd walk her home after the meetings, his presence a solid, reassuring shield against the creeping night. "The Lord is my shepherd," he would quote, his voice a low, steady rumble. "I shall not want. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." And for a little while, walking beside him, Jenna wouldn't. She'd feel a flicker of the peace she had in teen known since she was a child. He listened, really listened, and in a town that felt like it was holding its breath, that was a rare and precious thing. The disappearances continued. Number 11 was a girl Jenna had gone to high school with. Number 12 was a checkout clerk from the grocery store. The Shadow was getting bolder, the time between his hunts growing shorter. The town was a powder keg of paranoia. Fathers met their daughters at the bus stop. Husbands insisted on driving their wives to work. The usual evening foot traffic on Main Street dwindled to nothing after sunset. Derry was shutting down, cowering from the monster in its midst. It was after the 12th victim that Pastor Michael's demeanor began to shift, just slightly. The change was so subtle at first that Jenna almost missed it. During their walks home, his hand would brush against hers, lingering a moment too long. His questions became more personal, less about her faith and more about her life, specifically her love life. "A beautiful young woman like you, Jenna," he said one evening, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You must have boys lined up around the block." Jenna just laughed it off. "Not really, Pastor. I'm too busy working to think about all that." "You should make time," he insisted, his tone hardening for a fraction of a second before softening again. "It's not good for a woman to be alone, especially not now." The Bible study group shrank until it was just her and him. The others, he explained, were too afraid to be out after dark. Jenna understood, but a new kind of unease began to prickle at her. The church basement, once a sanctuary, now felt claustrophobic. The air grew thick and heavy during their sessions, charged with an energy that had nothing to do with scripture. He started suggesting they meet for coffee, for dinner. He called it fellowship, but the word felt wrong on his lips, felt like a disguise. One Tuesday, she tried to beg off the study session, pleading a headache. His voice on the phone was tight with disappointment, an edge of something sharp and cold beneath the surface. But Jenna, this is when we need our faith the most. This is when we need each other. Don't let the darkness win. His words were a guilt trip wrapped in a prayer, and she found herself reluctantly agreeing to come. That night, he didn't talk about the Bible at all. He talked about her, about how he saw a special light in her. He believed God had brought them together for a reason. "I think you're a wonderful pastor, Michael," she said carefully, trying to keep her voice steady. "But that's all. I'm not interested in anything more." The warmth vanished from his face as if a switch had been flipped. The kind, compassionate mask fell away, and for the first time, Jenna saw the man underneath. His jaw tightened, and a muscle pulsed in his cheek. His eyes, those eyes she had once found so comforting, were now cold and flat, like stones at the bottom of a well. "Not interested," he repeated, the words low and dangerous. "After all I've done for you, after I've offered you my protection, my guidance." He stood up. His large frame suddenly seemed to fill the entire room, casting a long, distorted shadow on the stone wall behind him. "You think you can just say no? To me?" The fear that had been her constant companion for months exploded in her chest, white-hot and absolute. It wasn't the vague, formless terror of a faceless monster anymore. It had a name. It had a face. It was standing 3 feet away from her in a locked church basement. The cold spot she'd felt in her apartment, the flicker of movement in her vision, the footsteps that always seemed to be just behind her, it was all him. It had always been him. He had been walking her home to make sure she got there, so he would know exactly where she was. He had been her shepherd, leading her not to safety, but to the slaughter. "The alley," she whispered, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. The breadcrumbs they found. They weren't leading nowhere. They were leading away from the church, a deliberate misdirection. He was smart, patient. He hid in the most obvious place of all, in the light. His lips twisted into a cruel smile, a grotesque parody of the kind one he had worn for so long. He took a step toward her, his shadow swallowing her whole. "That's right," Pastor Michael said, his voice the rustle of dead leaves in the wind. "Blood Alley. It's funny, isn't it? The places people are most afraid of are often the safest. It's the places they trust, the people they trust. That's where the real monsters hide." He took another step, and Jenna knew with a certainty that froze the marrow in her bones, that the valley of the shadow of death wasn't a place you walked through. It was a place you were dragged into, and her guide had finally brought her to the entrance. There was no one to fear evil for, because he was with her.